Hi, I'm Inger Tudor, and you are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series, Beyond Your Narrator episode.
Today we have Christina Stevens. She is a writer at Deluxe. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
This is exciting to get to know you and get to meet you and find out a little more about your audio description efforts in the writing side. A lot of the writing seems to be the core of this work in audio description, and maybe we could just jump in and ask you what you love about audio description.
Well, what I love about audio description is it's a way to enjoy movies, and movies are a big love of mine, and I love to be able to bring that to people who might not be able to enjoy it otherwise. So yeah, I love audio description because it brings movies to a wider audience. And I love the way it makes us look at movies because it's new every single time we look at it. You know, we're spending a lot of time breaking things down. And I learned so much more just from the process of doing it than I would have ever learned just watching it.
Can you share some of your process about how you break down a movie, whether it's what you focus on or maybe how you look at movies?
Before I start writing, I watch the whole movie through once, at least, and then we take notes. We take a lot of notes. We always watch the whole thing because there's stuff that comes up in the process that you think you know what's going on in one scene, but you see the end and you're like, well, I'm going to need to drop some hints about such and such in order to connect something plot relevant. So we take a lot of notes, characters and plot points, and when things are introduced. And then we start writing, and it is sort of a tedious process, as you can imagine. And we're learning so much more about the story, even at that point. Once we start writing, we're picking up little things here and there. It's basically like watching a movie dozens of times, because you're watching it that closely to try and fit in all the details and kind of get the feel of every scene and try to capture, what the artistic intent is of everything. That's the process. And then usually once we're done with the sort of like a first or kind of a rough draft, we will read through the whole thing once more. And you catch stuff at that point just because, like I said, you're trying to get a big picture and a little picture at the same time. So it's a longer process than I think people would think, but you try to be very thorough.
When you make your decisions in writing the script, whether it's the big picture or the little picture, what are some questions that you ask yourself, or what's your focus?
It's first and foremost, what does the listener need to know to understand what's going on? And so that's plot relevant stuff always comes first. So if a line or if a plot point wouldn't be understood without a detail, we have to do whatever we can to fit that in. And then, secondary to that is sort of like little details that are amusing or funny. We're trying to get the timing right for jokes so that jokes can land in the same way.
It's exciting to hear your writing focus, including things like the timing for the jokes, and you take that into consideration.
We definitely try to take the jokes into consideration, or if somebody makes fun of someone for something, we need to make sure that we've prepped that joke or that comment, just so that, hey, if someone's shirt gets made fun of, we should introduce that shirt so that we know.
Gotcha. Do you find any experiences that you've had in other work outside of audio description has helped you in audio description, or maybe even you've had to unlearn some things?
Yeah, I think, most of us have kind of a screenwriting background. There are a lot of elements that are similar, but obviously it's completely different. It's almost like the reverse of a screenplay, working backwards from a movie. But all that stuff is really helpful in terms of the language you use and being very succinct, because sometimes you have just a couple of frames to try and get something across. So that sort of writing training is helpful in those situations. But yeah, there's certain things you have to unlearn. You wouldn't make any kind of commentary or anything, or any like editorializing in audio description. You wouldn't make any assumptions, which you can do in a script because you can do whatever you want. But In terms of other experiences, I think the writers that I work with and myself have watched like a lot of movies. We're not like casual casual movie watchers. And I think that really helps because you need to have a handle on different genres and what to look for in different things, and even just how things are structured. And it helps to be sort of well watched and well read, because you don't want to miss any little, I don't know, Easter eggs in movies or TV, especially. You're working on the 9th or 10th or 20th movie in a series. We would hope that the writer had seen the other movies just so that they can pick up on little things that fans of that series might want to hear about.
Especially if we could go back to that read through that you do towards the end of your process. Do you find yourself reading it through out loud, or is it to yourself?
Yes.
Or
because we're sort of we're prepping for you guys, we're prepping for the actors to we want to make sure everything fits. And of course we are not professional actors at all, but we want to make sure that the actor is not going to have a problem saying anything. And sometimes you'll find that you've accidentally written like a real tongue twister, and you wouldn't know that unless you read it out loud. So we can switch it around. If I think, like, if I'm having trouble saying it, I don't want to make someone try to say it fast,
Sure.
But you guys, the actors, are all such pros that sometimes I'm like, ooh, I don't know if, that was tough for me to get through speed-wise, but it needs to fit. And then I'll listen to it after, and the actor will have gotten through it. No problem. It sounds beautiful and clear. So such pros. That's their job, and they're really good at it. So
since you're bringing it up about the narrator, what works for you when it comes to a professional narration read for your script? What do you like to hear?
Personally, I know that there's like a lot of people like different things.
Sure.
I really like something that's not too flat, but not getting too emotive. It's such a fine line, and I'm so impressed by everybody who does it, because it's kind of a neutral voice, but not boring or flat. So bringing a little something to it, but not telling the audience how to feel through their voice.
I've not heard you explain that clearly, so obviously your writing skills are coming out in the explanation of that.
Thank you.
Do you find any challenges in the audio description process that you've been really proud on overcoming?
Different genres are really hard, and I think we all have our own favorites or our own things that we find really difficult. I personally love watching action movies. They can be really hard to describe because you're left with something that is so complicated, like choreography that's so complicated and not a lot of time or whatever it is. My colleague and I did the last 2 John Wick movies. Those were really tough, just because the choreography is so specific, and you would imagine that a person who wanted to enjoy John Wick would want to know what all the cool fights were specifically. So you really have to get into it, and it's kind of a balancing act of, I can't fit everything, but what is the coolest stuff to fit in? We're proud of that. It's trying to match the tone too, because that movie can be very overwhelming. It's very stimulating, and it moves very fast. And I think the audio description kind of matches that tone. Yeah, we're working on movies like Avengers, like Infinity War and Endgame are big. Cumulatively, it's the end of a lot of movies. And I was really proud of that. I was actually an intern at Marvel when the first Avengers came out. And it felt like really full circle to work on the audio description for the last 2. And I love those movies, and I know them very well. And it felt like the right fit. So again, my colleague and I worked on those, and we're very proud.
Oh, I bet, yeah. And that experience as an intern that's got to have helped a little bit on the audio description, yeah. Yeah,
totally. It was a really fun experience. I have nothing but good things to say about it, but I learned a lot from people there. I would say I was always my knowledge was always dwarfed by everyone who works there who knows just every tiny little thing. But it's very inspiring, and we sort of strive to get that level of detail into the description when we can. But yeah, like we said, I mean, there's effort made to put people on projects that they're sort of invested in, and I was certainly invested in that one.
Yeah. And I can only imagine that those examples of Marvel films, let's say a 2-hour Marvel film or a 2-hour John Wick film, is going to be a different commitment than a 2-hour drama where there's a lot of dialogue.
Yes. Yeah. Romantic comedies tend to be really quick when, whenever the focus is on like long dialogue scenes, that makes it a lot simpler for us because we just kind of let the actors do their thing, and it doesn't require too much description.
Can you talk a little bit more about letting the actors do their thing? That's something that it seems like you writers take into consideration as far as the emotional tone of the audience's experience of the film.
We take a lot of that into consideration. So for like a long dialogue scene, you don't want to describe something just to describe something, to just say she blinks or something like that would not be adding anything. So in a scene like that, you definitely want to take into consideration, what would this description be adding? Is it needed? Sometimes it is. Sometimes someone smiles in a certain way or makes a gesture, makes a face, and that might change the way someone perceived an interaction. I wouldn't interrupt something just to say something, just to say anything. Because actors, they're so great and they're doing so much with their voice and with their silence too. It's not really needed. And the same goes for like music. Sometimes the music or the score is so beautiful, you try to let a little of that come through, since that's a big part of the movie too. And sound effects, when you can, we end up having to go over them a lot in order to get in what's happening. But if we can let the music or let the sound effects come through, that's ideal.
Where would you like audio description to go if you were to have your dream world?
Well, obviously, we would love for it to be available everywhere, and we'd love for it to not be, I think it can be sort of a hassle to get it in theaters. I would love for that process to be easier. I've gone through it myself just to see what it was like, and theaters in general are accommodating, but it's certainly a hassle a lot of the time. I love to see it on everything and have it be everywhere and have people be able to access it with no problem. That would be ideal.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I love writing audio description. It's something that I never knew about before I started doing it. The first time I actually heard it was in a theater where they accidentally turned it on and they could not turn it off for some reason. So it played for the whole theater. The director was there. The director of the movie was there and heard the whole thing. So, I mean, I think that's probably pretty rare for the director of a movie to hear the audio description for it, which is unfortunate. I wish they would. But that was the first time I heard about it, and I never thought it would be something that I would do. And once I got into it, I just fell in love with it. And even now, sometimes I'll pop on audio description from other companies or from my colleagues. I love to hear it, and I love to hear really good, thoughtful audio description on things. That's really encouraging. I would love to continue doing it.
How can people reach you?
There's a audio description page on Facebook. I know a lot of people participate there, and sometimes my colleagues will participate in that as well and see those messages. So those are not going unheard. We do look at those, and we do like to hear feedback from people on those posts, and we do go look for it after something comes out, because we'd like to hear what people liked or didn't like or what could be done better. We're certainly not doing it just for ourselves. So we love to hear from the people who use it, and it's always nice. It's always nice to hear from them.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing all this, Christina. It's been really, really helpful and informative. Thank you.
Yeah, so.
This is great.